So thanks so much, everybody, for joining. It's great to see you all. So the name of this session is Supermind Design for Community Biogovernance. And so we're going to do a bunch of things today. We're going to learn about Superminds, what that is. We're going to learn about Supermind Design, which is a particular type of innovation methodology that I have been co-developing along with Professor Tom Malone at MIT Sloan School in the Center for Collective Intelligence. And then we're going to talk about how that particular design methodology has been applied to help design the governance exercise that hopefully some of you have had a chance to play with a little bit, at least on Friday potentially. And then we're actually going to go and do the governance exercise itself. So we're actually going to go ahead and try it out and see how it goes. And I'm very curious about all of your feedback and your experience and what you think of that process. So that is our goal for today. We've got, I believe, until, let me see here, 4:45. So we've got about an hour and 15 minutes between now and when we'll wrap up. So we have quite a bit of time. So to start, I just wanted to ask, out of curiosity, if if anybody here actually participated in the governance exercise on Friday. Can you raise your hand if you had a chance to participate in that? Salman did. Okay, so it looks like it looks like Beth did. Okay, great. So we have a couple, so that's great. And so you all will by the end of this, and we're also going to take a little bit of time and debrief that whole process. So what I'm going to do to start is I guess I'll present some slides, and I'll talk a little bit about Superminds and Supermind Design. Can you all see my slides? Okay. So the first question is, what are Superminds? And this is actually something that we've talked about at the past couple of bio summits, because I think one of the real exciting parts about community bio and about this whole larger movement that we're all a part of is the idea of collective intelligence, is the idea that we've got this distributed group of humans all around the world that are working together with some type of a common goal, some type of a common purpose. And so one of the big questions is, how do we think about what these groups of humans are and how do we organize them? And actually we can organize groups of humans in a few different ways, which are probably familiar to most of you. So we can, for example, I'm going to jump ahead over here, to orient ourselves as humans in a few different formats. So you are familiar with, for example, hierarchies. So typical companies, structures where you've got a boss, right? These are hierarchies. There's also democracies, which many of you, probably all of you, are a part of, where you have some type of representation, you have some power in terms of voting, either representative democracy, etc. Markets, which are a big part of our economic system, so we can make decisions in groups that way. And also communities, which is probably most aptly describing the BioSummit community, for example. Now, the BioSummit organizers, that actually has some hierarchy, but it's very, very light hierarchy, but there is a little bit of hierarchy. And if you think about nonprofit organizations that you might be a part of, almost many organizations you can think of have some type of a hierarchy. But communities are a little different, right? It's like, all of the members, the participants of the BioSummit, that's really a community. There's no boss. There's nobody that tells anybody else what to do. Everybody can kind of do what they want. And so that's very common as well in society, of course. And then finally, there are ecosystems. So ecosystems are combinations of these other different types of superminds. And actually, ecosystems in some way are probably the most prevalent form of a supermind, because even within a hierarchy, for example, you have communities within a hierarchy. So you could, for example, take like a big company like Apple or Google. Now, there's clearly a hierarchy with a CEO and other structures underneath that. But then within that, there can be groups that are communities. The employees of Apple might be a community. So it actually can get a little bit complex once you start really analyzing and thinking about the different types of group structures within each type of group structure, which is presented here. Okay, but these are basically some of the examples of the sort of classic different types of superminds. And for myself, this part of why I got excited about this framework was because, a couple of years ago, when I first met Tom, at the time we were organizing the Bio Summit, and it really occurred to me pretty early on that, what we were really doing was actually building a global community supermind, right? There was a big network of folks that were trying to work together with a common purpose. And so we were trying to figure out what are the best ways to organize a supermind like the Bio Summit or like Community Bio. And so what we did was, as a part of trying to think about this, Tom and I started thinking about this notion of designing superminds, right? So how might you actually design a supermind, be it a hierarchy, a community, an ecosystem, et cetera. And so some of you may be familiar with certain types of creativity systems. For example, design thinking. I'm curious how many of you have participated or done design thinking before. If you can just raise your hand or acknowledge somehow in the chat. So design thinking is a certain type of innovation methodology that is often used in design settings, certain creativity settings. Now, design thinking is really cool, and I've done a bunch of design thinking work as well, but it's often product-based or thinking about user experience, whereas superminds are fundamentally about systems. It's about groups of people in a structure. And so what we started working on in our collaboration was really thinking about an innovation process, much like you could do design thinking for user-centered design around objects or things that you might interact with in the world. What about being able to design these superminds? And so fundamentally, Supermind design is an innovation process, it's a creativity process, and it's basically about generating ideas. It's a system for generating lots and lots and lots of hopefully good ideas that might help you think about how to structure and organize whatever type of supermind you might be talking about, be it a community or so on. In regards to link to material, there is a book that Tom wrote called Superminds, which you can find and purchase. Tom and I have been working on a few different materials. There's a Supermind Design primer, which I can link and share to you guys a little bit later on. So again, if you sign the attendance sheet, I think somebody, I think the notes doc was shared earlier. Natalia shared some notes. Natalia, if you don't mind resharing that too, because I think we've had some new people join the room. If you all sign in and just put your names and email addresses, I can send you the Supermind Design primer after this, and we can all stay in touch and talk more. And actually, I feel like we could also even set up a Supermind Slack on the Slack, in the larger Slack, and we can talk more about it there too. And I should say too that this methodology is very much still being developed. This is something actively being developed right now. It's not a polished product by any means. We've done a lot of experiments. We've worked with a couple of different corporations to try to do some innovation with them. Tom and I are currently teaching a class at MIT called Supermind Design for Responding to COVID-19. And actually both Shrestha and Salman, who are here in the room today, are both listeners in the class, which is really great. So they get the crossover of both being BioSummit organizers and also being now Supermind Design acolytes, or folks that are familiar with the methodology. So they'll also be helping a little bit later on once we shift into the workshop part. So what is Supermind Design actually? And so there's a couple of key stages, and it's defined here at the bottom of the slide. There's a first step, which is defining the problem, right? How do we actually even figure out what we're solving for? The second question is generating ideas. And then this third step is evaluating ideas, right? So it should be pretty straightforward and simple. This is a pretty standard kind of creativity format when you're trying to solve all different kinds of problems. You know, what's your problem? How do we generate lots of ideas? And how do we figure out what are the best ones? And so what's unique about Supermind Design is that it's built around a couple of key, what we call conceptual moves. And so these are moves that enable you, once you have a particular type of an idea or a concept, to then apply these moves to this concept in different stages. You can kind of apply the moves in different ways, in different orders. But in a way, it's sort of like a stepwise process to go from one place, one idea, to then generating more and more ideas through application of these moves. So I'll give you an example of a couple of moves and show how these work. So one of the basic design moves is to zoom in or to zoom out. So for example, I could say something like, you know, the BioSummit, right? That would be one place to start. But then what's zooming out of the BioSummit? Maybe zooming out of the BioSummit, because this is really an event with a bunch of people that care about a certain shared purpose. I could zoom out of the BioSummit and then say the community bio movement, right? That's zooming out another layer of abstraction that is bigger than the BioSummit, but still connected and related to the BioSummit. I could zoom in, let's say I was at the BioSummit at that level of abstraction, and then I zoom in, I could zoom into where we are right now. I could zoom into the workshops track, right? This is a part of the BioSummit. It's a subset of the BioSummit, right? So the zoom in and zoom out moves are fundamentally about kind of moving up and down layers of abstraction within a given concept. So take the United States. Let's say we were looking at the United States. I could zoom in from the United States and look at Massachusetts, where I am. I could take the United States and zoom out and go to North America. Right? Does that make sense? So zoom in and zoom out are just kind of a conceptual way of looking and looking more closely at a certain aspect of the problem, or looking out and seeing where you were as a composite part of a larger set. Yeah. So that's zoom in, zoom out. Another move that is pretty useful is analogize, right? So analogize would be, for example, let's say we're looking at the United States as a country. What's another type of country? Maybe, or what's another country that's out there in the world, right? What about Canada? That would be an analogy to the United States. Or let's look at the BioSummit. We've got the BioSummit, which is an event that brings together a network of folks, in this case, that care about community bio, DIY bio, biohacking, et cetera. What would be an analogy to the BioSummit? And here, actually, I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a moment. We can do this live. And actually, if you don't mind turning on your cameras too, so we can all see each other, that always helps a little bit. As instructors, you're always kind of seeing a wall of names. It's not nearly as nice as seeing some faces. So great. So let's just play this game for a moment. What would be an analogy to the BioSummit? Anybody can unmute themselves and chime in with a thought.
It's a soup.
It's a soup?
You put together design, art, biotechnology, policy, governance, students, you mix a big soup.
Yeah, in that way, it's like a delicious stew. I like that a lot. BioSummit is a tasty stew. But in the context of the methodology, so that's a really great metaphor that you could think about BioSummit. But in this context of analogize, my question more is, okay, BioSummit is an organization, or it's a gathering that's bringing together a whole bunch of people that care, in this case, about a topic like grassroots life sciences, open science. So what would be, if you wanted to apply the analogy move to BioSummit, what might you think of? I'll give you guys one example, and then we'll do another one another example to play. So another one might be, for example, FabX. FabX is the conference that's run by the Fab Lab Network, which is for the maker movement, and they run a gathering that happens every year. And each year they add a number to it. It's like Fab 10, Fab 11. So this year they did FabX, which is a virtual event. So that would be a good analogy, I think, to the BioSummit, where it's similarly a gathering of people, except this time, instead of caring about community bio, they care about making in the maker movement, right? So I'll pose another thought experiment. What would be if we wanted to analogize to, for example, let's say the global collaborations track at the BioSummit? Does anybody have any thoughts?
Did you wash your hand after doing that?
Oop. Can we, whoever is the Zoom host, I think Lizzie, if you can help mute people, yeah. Great, thank you. Yeah. But what would be an analogy, for example, to the global collaborations track that's happening right now? Any thoughts? If we were to apply the analogize move as I was just describing it. Any ideas? I'll give you guys a hint, or if we think about the global collaborations track as one of the program tracks that's happening at the BioSummit, then an analogy to that might be the responding to COVID-19 track. It's another track within the BioSummit, but not exactly the same one, but another track, right? So that would be an analogy. Let's continue doing this just for a little bit so you can get a feel for this. So let's say, for example, something like Wikipedia. What would be a good analogy for Wikipedia? Anybody have any ideas?
A dictionary.
A dictionary, excellent. Perfect, that's right, a dictionary. So what is Wikipedia? Wikipedia is a knowledge resource. Oh, we're seeing something in the chat here. Oh, this is good. I'm so sorry. I apologized. I was missing this in the chat. Yeah, exactly. Gosh, DevCon, non-com. Those are exactly. Those are great analogies. Exactly. Okay, so you guys get it. So that's the analogize move. Okay. Now, so you can see with both zoom in, zoom out, and with analogize, they're great ways to kind of go from a certain concept, and then if you want to force your brain to think a little bit more about it, you can apply one of the moves and sort of see what happens next. And so I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. And so another couple moves that we have here, for example, are the Groupify move, right? So, and we've defined it here as view as being done by a group and not an individual. All right. So this would be, for example, if I was talking about like LeBron James, basketball player. Okay. If I want to groupify LeBron James, I could then say the Los Angeles Lakers, right? Because now it's not just about him as an individual, it's the group that he's a part of, right? So you could even say, you know, David Kong, BioSummit organizer, but then it would become like the entire organizing team, the entire organizing group would be to Groupify. So, and this I think is actually a really important distinction between design thinking and Supermind design. Design thinking is typically about user innovation and individuals thinking about their individual perspective on a problem, whereas design thinking is, whereas Supermind design is about the group. It's about the collective. So again, you know, we can think, for example, about a doctor, right? So that's an individual, but then a doctor's office, that might be now thinking about it in terms of a group. So that's Groupify. Technify is a move that focuses on cognitive processes and activity. I'll explain a little bit more about that one in a moment. And Technify is basically identifying ways of using technology and activity. Okay, so let me stop sharing my screen again. So we were talking earlier about encyclopedias, right? Now, how might you Technify an encyclopedia? And I'll give you a hint, and we talked about it earlier, actually. An exact example of Technifying an encyclopedia. If you want to apply it. Exactly. Wikipedia is Technifying an encyclopedia, right? You've already got an encyclopedia. Now I want to think about a technology framework or a way to use it. Boom, Wikipedia. Exactly, exactly. So let's maybe do another one for fun. What about like, for example, a phone book? How would we Technify a phone book?
Digitize it and make it immediately searchable.
What was that? Say that again.
Digitize it, make it into an app, make it searchable on your computer.
Yeah, exactly. That's great. Google Contacts, exactly. Contacts list on a smartphone, exactly. That's right. Beth is asking the question, how do you balance Technify with equity inclusion, e.g. older folks who might not be comfortable with online platform? So it's really, really great question. I think the way to think about these moves do not, at this stage, take into account those aspects. What the moves are for is basically generating ideas. Now you remember the three-step process. Step one is define a problem. Step two is generate ideas. Step three is evaluate ideas. So you're getting into evaluation, like what is actually good or better, or how might we judge them, etc. What the methodology is really useful for is helping in that creativity stage, which is let's generate a whole bunch of ideas. We don't know exactly what's going to be good or bad. We just want to get a whole bunch of stuff out there, right? That's when the methodology is the most useful to start. But great question. I'll pause here actually. Any questions so far? Is this all making sense so far?
So something I was wondering is, can you like expand on the relationship between Supermind and emergent behavior? Like, are you designing a system to create the emergent behavior you want to see? Like, are you creating those relationships for your end goal, or like, yeah, what?
Yeah, great question. Was that Michelle?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you, Michelle. Excellent question. So the Supermind itself, as I was describing, is basically the group of humans that's doing whatever it is that they're doing in whatever format that might be it a community, a market, a democracy, etc. Supermind Design, the methodology, is basically an innovation practice to help you come up with ideas about what that Supermind might be. So it's a creativity methodology. So and I think it'll be helpful once I actually walk through an example of how applying the moves actually works. Actually, let me do that, and hopefully and you can tell me if I've answered your question by giving you this example. So let's say, for example, and this is one of Tom's examples that he likes to give, and I'll walk through this. Let's say that you had a question. This is a problem statement. How can a doctor diagnose depression? Right? This is something you want to try to figure out how to solve. Remember the three steps. The first step is, what's your problem? The second step is, then how do we generate ideas, right? So the first one is, how can a doctor diagnose depression? If we groupify that and think about it not just being as an individual doctor, we could then say, how can a doctor's office diagnose depression, right? So we've gone from an individual now to a group. Now, if we zoom out from the doctor's office, we can maybe ask, how can the healthcare system diagnose depression, right? So now we're moving up an abstraction layer from not just the doctor's office to now the entire healthcare system. Now, in this case, Tom has applied the zoom out move again from the healthcare systems to society, right? Society is comprised of many systems. There's an economic system, a political system, a healthcare system. So we went from a healthcare system, now we've zoomed out to society and asked, how can society diagnose depression? In the next step, now Tom has zoomed in from society to say, how can communities diagnose depression? Okay, so now before we were at the society level, now we've zoomed in to look at communities. And now he's applied the Technify move. How can online social networks diagnose depression? All right, so again, we applied a technology, just like we did with Wikipedia and encyclopedias. And then finally, he's put in this Cognify move. So actually, I haven't explained Cognify yet. But Cognify, just roll with me on this one. It's really about providing different perception in this case. So how can online networks sense depression? Then Tom's applied the Technify move. And if you want to technify social network sensing depression, you could say machine learning as a technology can detect communication patterns in online social networks that predict depression. So basically the final idea here is actually using machine learning as a technology to look at social networks and analyze data about social networks to try to detect or predict depression. So if we go back to the start of this, we started with this question of how can a doctor diagnose depression? That was the initial formal problem statement to start. But by going through this series of moves, we ended up with a pretty creative solution at the end of it, right? Of now a technology that we can imagine that maybe we could use machine learning and social networks to help predict depression. So this is an example of the methodology basically in action. And so let me see what the next one, so I already went through this one. So this is just one example showing you how you can go from an initial concept and then step through a series of those moves to end up in another conceptual place that hopefully leads you to some good ideas, okay? I'm gonna pause there and just ask if that was confusing or if that made sense to folks. Was that reasonably okay, or was that still a little confusing? You guys like that? Did that make sense? So part of it too, we actually apply these moves in our own cognition and our own creativity processes all the time. We're not necessarily calling them zoom in or zoom out or analogize, but in the framework, we're basically, you can think about each of these moves as sort of like a tool that as part of your brainstorm and your creativity process, you can leverage and use in ways to generate more and more ideas. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share with you guys an example of how we actually applied the methodology specifically around community bio and this conference and the governance exercise that we showed. So just give me a moment while I open up the BioSummit website and also a Google Doc here. So I'm going to show you guys this is actually the working doc that Tom and I used to come up with the prompts that are part of the governance. Actually, let me show you the governance exercise first, and then I'll show you how we came up with it after. So I think, as you all hopefully know, at the BioSummit each year, we've had a larger theme that's been associated with the conference. So the second year, our theme was, what is our statement of shared purpose, right? Like, why are we here? What are we doing here together? Our third year was about ethics. And then this year, our theme was around governance, okay? So hopefully you've all by now seen the statement of shared purpose that we have. And this was a big co-design workshop process that we did 2 years ago in 2018. And it reads, our shared purpose is to fundamentally transform life sciences and democratize biotechnology, to inspire creativity and improve lives by organizing life science change makers and bioenthusiasts, to build an inclusive global network, cultivate an accessible commons of knowledge and resources, launch community labs and projects, and enable local educators. So really beautiful statement. But then the next question is, how might we think about this larger community bio supermind? How could we design it in a way to actually realize this statement of shared purpose, right? This is a very laudable and wonderful statement, but how do we make it real, right? How can we make it real? And so what Tom and I did was we basically started working through the Supermind Design methodology to generate a series of prompts that were built from this statement of shared purpose. So what we did was Here's the statement again, written out in text form. We looked at, for example, this clause, build an inclusive global network. All right, so if you, and actually for all of you, as I'm talking, if you don't mind a separate browser, open up this webpage, open up biosummit.live/governance. Okay, if you can just open up that webpage as I'm talking. And so if you click into that first prompt 1, build an inclusive global network, that's the first prompt that's shown. You can see that there's a whole bunch of questions here, right? Who is a member of the global network? How does one become a member of the global network? If there's an application process, who decides whether an application is accepted? What are the rights and responsibilities of the members? What are the norms of the global network? And so on. So I'll come back and explain to you how we did this, but Tom and I basically used the methodology to come up with these questions. Now you'll notice this goes back to Beth's earlier point. We're not saying what's better or worse about who could be a member or how do you become a member. We're not applying any judgments at this stage. We're just posing a question. And so part of what's happening in this exercise, you can see, is that it's pretty neat. So this exercise, it's set up in a series of worksheets, and shout outs to Salman and to Shrestha for also helping to organize all this. This particular worksheet accomplishes two things. One, it enables groups to asynchronously work on this exercise together, which we're all about to do in a moment. And then two, you can also do the evaluation. So Beth, this is where, again, if you like the thing, you can give it a little +1, I like this. You could even, if you want, put some comments in here. We haven't done this in this sheet yet, but you could pose a question like the one that you asked earlier. And so part of this process though, and the other thing I should mention, the very last prompt, oh wow, this is cool, it's been filled out a lot more. You can create your own questions, right? You can say, what's a prompt that you feel is connected to this question about an inclusive global network that has not yet been brought up, and then you can thus add yourself a new question. So if we go back to the larger exercise, again, you see the statement of shared purpose, it's built, we broke up basically 4 of the key prompts, one around building an inclusive network. The next one is around cultivating an accessible commons of knowledge and resources. The third one, and so for each one of these, if you launch this one, there's a separate Google Doc with, again, a series of prompts. So cultivate an accessible commons of knowledge and resources. What kinds of knowledge and resources should be included? What kinds of physical resources should be included? How do we share these knowledge and resources, etc.? So it's a really methodical list of questions. And if you kind of, to use our parlance, zoom out and look at this whole thing, if you really wanted to actualize the statement of shared purpose, you would have to have a good answer for every single one of these questions, right? You would have to know about what are the details around these knowledge resources that we're trying to build? How do we actually make them? How do we resource them, etc.? So what's cool about this exercise, in my view, and hopefully you will find it useful as well, is that if we can come up with answers to these questions, then we've actually got a pretty good way that we might be able to design this larger supermind. Okay, so this is, and so actually, I'll pause here so far for questions. So far, there's another couple of layers to this, but we'll go step by step and go a little bit slowly since we have some time. Does everything I said so far make sense? Yeah? Okay. If everything is making sense so far, then let me share with you the next layer of this and why I also personally think this is so cool. So what you are all about to do is, we're actually going to break into groups using the tool Mingler. And let me stop sharing. Actually, I want to see you all. I'm curious, how many of you had a chance to play with Mingler so far? Can you raise your hand or give a little icon? Looks like Michelle, Salma, and Beth. Okay, but it looks like a lot of you have not had a chance to try. Oh, Forum's tried it? Okay, great. Oh, Shrestha too, great. Of course, Shrestha's done it. Shrestha made the how-to video, by the way, how to use Mingler. So shout outs to Shrestha for that. So basically how this works, and just to say, this is very BioSummit. Before we designed this thing, we have no idea if it was going to work or if it was going to be useful. We think it's pretty cool, at least so far from when we tried on Friday, and you all were about to try this now, and we'll see. But what we did was, we coupled each one of these prompts with a group in an app called Mingler. Okay, so if I click over into this Mingler group over here, and you will have to create an account. If you have a Google account, it should automatically work. Oh, it looks like there are 2 people in there, or 3 people in here already. All right, so how this would work is, If you are interested in working on the Build an Inclusive Global Network prompt, you go into Mingler, and you see here there's a row of names here on the left. So let's say swap nil. I can click swap nil, and here they are. And now I've basically sent them a prompt saying that I want to chat with them. And so they're sitting there. If they accept my prompt, then it'll launch us into a private video chat, and then the two of us can have a one-on-one conversation. Okay. Part of the reason why this is really cool is when you're doing the exercise, which might be, hey, let's work on this Build an Inclusive Global Network exercise, right? When you're doing this exercise, you actually have the opportunity to, in your sheet, to work in pairs to say, hey, let's work on who's a global network. Let's say Kenza and I ended up in a room together. Then we could talk and say, all right, well, which one of these questions do you want to answer? Let's do the global network one. What do you think? Who should be in the global network? Should it be high school friends or industrial labs? Like, who are the people that should be a part of the network, right? And we could talk about it and then add a contribution. Now, the reason why I think that part is so critical, for those of you that were there for Marshall Ganz's talk on Friday, one thing that Marshall really emphasized, and I personally believe in deeply, and is a huge part of what the BioSummit is about, is relational building. Relation building and relational connection and networking is a massive part about how you make real statements of shared purpose, how you make real, structuring a network, right? There's something, you can have a piece of paper, right, that says a whole bunch of great things on it, but it doesn't really mean anything unless that piece of paper, unless the things written on that piece of paper are lived, they're embodied in our relationships with other people. And so that's why relational work is so critical, and it's so foundational to Marshall's work. And so what Mingler enables you to do is, as you're going through this exercise, instead of you just kind of sitting there kind of thinking to yourself, hey, what do I think about this? You're actually engaging with another community member, another person that has a stake in the answer to this question, and that you can work together to manifest something that actually represents your values. And then you can put that into the document, right? So we think this is a pretty innovative thing. We're actually combining a few different frameworks together. So the statement of shared purpose that I just showed you is actually built off of a larger process that Marshall Ganz and Abel Kano from Friday. This is something that they've used for not decades, but for a very long time, very much inspired from Marshall Ganz's lived experience working in the civil rights movement, working with Martin Luther King, working with Cesar Chavez. This is how movements work. You need to be able to make explicit, implicit aspects of what you're all working together on, right? Otherwise, it's like, why are we all here? You know, do you guys know why you're here? Well, I think I'm here because of this. Why are you here? Well, I think I'm here because there's good food, or I'm here because I got a weird Zoom link, right? It's different than if you actually, in our case, like in 2018, we worked together in a relational process to build that statement of shared purpose. When we unveiled that in the closing session of BioSummit in 2018, people like stood up and applauded. I mean, it was like an emotional moment because it was like, hey, you know, I can see my word in there. Our group worked together and we came up with enabling local educators, right? We all agreed that that was really important. So that's why relational work is so important. And I think this is really an innovation in Supermind Design, which is being unveiled right now at BioSummit. Supermind Design, we've kind of have done it in class in a relational way at times. So Shrestha and Salman, who are in class, know, you know, we've done some stuff where it's like you could work on it as an individual, but it really comes alive when you're working with partners in the context of, for example, a Google Doc. You might have a Google Doc together, and then now you're working on ideas together. And in that collaborative context, something kind of magical happens, which is different than an individual working on it themselves. So part of this exercise that we've designed and really are prototyping here for the BioSummit is this combination of digital tools enabling geographically disparate work, so we can all collaborate and work together using these digital tools, video conferencing so that we have the relational aspect of being able to get the emotional feedback of watching a person, talking to them, working on a problem, to build and answer a question based on Marshall Ganz's system of statement of shared purpose, which is all about movement building, right? But then connected to Supermind Design, which allows us to actually generate these problem statements, like all that giant list of problem statements. I haven't shown you exactly how we use the methodology yet, but that was a whole process that we used the methodology step by step to actually generate those prompts. So going back to, I think it was Maria's comment earlier about the stew. This exercise is a stew of like a whole bunch of stuff that we kind of put together that we think is pretty cool, but you know, we're all going to try it and see how it works. Okay. So I'll pause here for some questions, but what I'd like to do after we take a few questions is actually let you guys actually use the worksheets and use the mingler and actually try out this process of doing the exercise itself. And then we'll come back together and debrief. I think we've got until 4:45, so we can spend the last like 10 minutes or so debriefing together. But I'll pause now for questions because I know I've just said a lot of stuff. So I will pause. Any questions? Feel free to unmute yourself directly if you'd like to ask a question. Excuse me. Was it just that everything I said was so so clear and concise that everybody just understands perfectly what I was talking about? I don't think I'm that eloquent, but hopefully that made sense to everybody.
I'm making some enzymes to digest all the information.
Good, good. Allow it to digest. You know, let me do one thing before I break us up into groups. Just because I can better connect the first part of the lecture with what I was just sharing. I'm going to show you the slides that I used with the Supermind design methodology to show how we came up with the prompts. That'll be one other thing to throw into the digestive system that you're building right now, Maria. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to share with you guys a very simple Google Doc. Okay, that and this is me and Tom's like worksheet when we were going through this. So. Where's a good place to start? Okay, here. So this is the first prompt, right? Build an inclusive network. We said to ourselves, well, what do we have to do? We have to decide who is a member of the network. Decide is the Technify move, okay? Technify was one of the moves I didn't explain this one in greater detail, but this was a decide move, right? We have to figure out who's a member. We also have to decide how the members make decisions. We have to decide what the norms of the community are. So we were basically applying the moves to figure out each one of those prompts that were showed before. I'll give you another one. So we talked earlier about the accessible commons of knowledge and resources, right? So we have to decide what kinds of knowledge and resources should be included. We have to decide if they're physical resources. So this one, there's a lot of decision-making process in this, which is built in. One of the prompts, though, is around analogies. Whoops, sorry. I'm actually in all of the Zoom rooms right now. So if any one of the other Zoom rooms shares a screen, it takes over my screen. So sorry about that. All of my focus is here with you guys, but my computer is in 5 different places. All right. So one of the prompts was, what kind of analogies for other types of accessible commons and knowledges and resources might be useful? So you'll notice that's one of the prompts in that long list of prompts is the analogize move. And we were just talking earlier about libraries, Wikipedia, et cetera, right? So what Tom and I did kind of cleverly was we applied some of the Supermind Design moves, but we built it into the prompt. So you actually, in answering the question, don't even know that you're using a move, but we kind of put it in there for you guys, just so you don't even know you're using the methodology, but you're doing it, okay? And so this is basically what we did to generate those prompts. We basically applied those design moves that I was showing you earlier to figure out, all right, well, if we want to cultivate this accessible commons of knowledge, what are the things we have to figure out? And then we systematically came up with a bunch of questions. Now, the prompts that we came up with are by no means exhaustive. They were just the first ones we did in about 15 minutes of brainstorming. And that's why if you go to these exercises, if you go, for example, at the very end, there's create your own prompt, right? You can yourselves decide like, hey, you know, we want to think about analogies, or how would you technify the membership process, right? Those are questions that you could ask an application of the move to generate a new prompt if you wanted to do that, okay? So, but I just wanted to share, just to connect those two things together so you can get a feel for how we actually came up with these different questions, right? Was by actually applying those moves in a systematic way. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and pause again for questions one more time.
Dave?
Yes.
Some questions in the chat as well.
Oh, great. Great.
I have a question, David.
Yes, please go for it.
The same, how we make it like a, you know, mutually exhaustive.
Can you say that one more time?
Sorry, I have. How to make it like mutually exclusive and completely exhaustive for the whole.
Oh wow.
You know.
Yeah, that's a really great question. If Tom were here, he would really nerd out with you, Ibrahim, because so one earlier concept that we were playing around with was the idea of a design library. So, and that's actually something we're building out as a Supermind design library. So If you think about what design libraries are, we use them all the time in engineering. If you think about what the BioBricks repository is, this is also envisioned to be like a design library, basically a whole set of parts that are inside that are characterized and organized in a systematic way that you can then use and build with. And so the notion of the Supermind Design Library is basically to try to figure out in a very exhaustive way what kind of all of the possible components could be, right? And so we do not, as of yet, have an exhaustive way to actually go through and do this currently. Now, this is, though, an interesting possibility, I think, for combining some machine learning or some other tools that could actually help generate a list of prompts in a more kind of rigorous, systematic way. But remember, the point of the Supermind design methodology is a creativity thing. It's there to help you come up with ideas. So think about it in a way, just like a way to augment your brainstorming. Now, if I didn't tell you anything about Supermind design and I asked you guys, how are we going to design an inclusive global network? You might sit there and be like, well, how are we going to do this? We might call up our friends. We might, we might look at other types of global networks, analogize. We might, et cetera. So you might have your own kind of organic brainstorm process, but the Supermind design moves, they're useful as a way to kind of give you an additional kick of creativity if you want it. Okay. So I think for now, because I want to be mindful of time too, I would love for you all to try the exercise itself and just try actually going through, using the mingler, talking with another person and trying to answer the prompts and just see what that experience is like. And then we can come back together and talk about what that was like. And again, this is also just the start of the conversation. If you guys are interested in this and want to learn more, one thing I want to do very much after the Bio Summit, I think what we've built with this governance exercise is actually really important for the larger movement. We don't have enough time at the Bio Summit for enough people to really do this in a dedicated way. So I was talking to Tom about this yesterday, or maybe I was dreaming that I was talking to Tom about it yesterday. I forget. These past 3 days are just like, my brain is kind of partially mush right now. After the Bio Summit, what I'm hoping to do is organize some more dedicated time and sessions where we actually do just the governance exercise, like get a group together like this for like a couple hours and just do it for a longer period of time. So I think that'll be a lot of fun. But for now, though, if you guys are cool about this, then I would propose we actually try the exercise. Does that sound good? Okay. So to actually do it, then, just to remind you, go to the biosummit.live website and go to the governance page. So I'm gonna link back here again so you know where you're looking, and pick a prompt. So I'm going to go to prompts 3 and 4 since these have the fewer things. If you guys don't mind focusing on these two, I think that might be nice since there's less stuff in there. So let's focus on prompts 3 and 4. Pick a mingler group that you want to go into. So pick one, open up that group, and then it might take a moment to log in. I would recommend if you log in via Gmail or via Facebook, that'll take you right in very fast. Then open up the Google Doc, find a partner, and actually start trying out the exercise. Does that sound good? So can you guys just give a thumbs up or an emoji if you're on the web page? Yes, you're on the web page. Okay, great. And now what we're gonna do is we'll leave the Zoom open. Okay, if you're in the exercise though, or if you're in Mingler, mute your audio, your Zoom audio, and we'll stop talking here, okay? So that if you're in Mingler, then you can talk with your person and not get weird feedback. But if you have questions, if the Mingler's not working or something's happening that's going wrong, you can use the Zoom chat. I'm gonna stay here in the main Zoom room, and we'll all stay in the Zoom room, but I'm gonna monitor the chat. So if you have any questions, just put it into the chat and I'll try to help you navigate it, okay? But for now then, let's go into either Mingler Group 3 or Group 4. So pick one you want. If you're more interested in enabling local educators, you're more interested in launching community labs and projects, pick one of those Mingler groups, and then let's see what happens. Does this sound good? And let's reconvene. We're going to run a little bit out of time, but let's convene in, let's see, 20 minutes. So let's go until 4, oh my God, I can't do math, 35. Let's do this. Let's try this for 20 minutes, okay? Yeah, be back here in 20 minutes. Stay in the Zoom room, but just try and see if you can get this working. And I will know when it's working when I see a bunch of mouths moving, actually. So if you're able to turn on your videos, that's great. But if not, that's totally fine. I'm actually going to go open up the two. I'm going to share my screen and go into the two groups just to see who's in there. It may take you a moment to create an account. So let's see. Oh, so it looks like Beth and Salman are already in there, which is great. So Beth and Salman, why don't you guys try talking to each other and see if that works?
Yeah, actually, I just put a call. So let's see, like, okay. I'm like in the waiting, I guess. Yeah.
Are you waiting for Beth to say yes?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Can you mute yourself, Salman, actually?
Yeah, sure.
Just in case somebody else. I'm going to check for. Oh, great. It looks like we've got a bunch of people interacting in force. It looks like Natalia, Shrestha, and a bunch of other folks are already talking in here, which is great. Beth, maybe try logging out and logging back in. And Salman, maybe try, oh, there we go. Looks like Daniel and Ali Key are talking. Great. So Maria, we're trying to keep everybody in prompt 3 and 4.
All right, it's time. Not sure if the rest still hears me now. So head back over to Zoom.
David, I think you're muted. Oh wait, maybe he's press muted.
Yeah, David, come back. All right, okay.
Hey, David, I think you're muted, or you were muted.
Hey, I'm back. Sorry, I was actually in the I was in a mingler room with Maria, and we were just wrapping a conversation. Sorry about that. Okay, cool. But we are back. All right. So I know for myself and Maria, we had a bunch of problems just getting into the room. There were just some technical difficulties of actually just getting the room process going. So that took a bunch of time. So we unfortunately didn't get a huge amount of time to actually do the exercise. But I saw a few of you, looks like you got in there okay. So for those of you that were able to get in there well, do you want to share a little bit about what your experience was like? I think, Beth, it looked like you were able to get into a room okay, right? You were able to have a conversation?
Yeah, Michelle and I were chatting a little bit about the teacher enable local educators. Yeah.
Oh, good. Yeah, tell us about how that went.
Yeah, it's cool. And I think it allowed us to just like spend some time brainstorming together and like to talk through things that we've seen or things that we notice are sticky issues or otherwise. It was nice.
Okay, good. And did Mingler work okay for you on the first try?
Yes.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay, good. I'm very, very glad to hear that. Cool. How about for other people? Can other people share their experience? Shifa, I think you have your hand raised. Do you have a question?
I always try, but it doesn't really work.
So which part? Did Shifa, did we lose Shifa? Oh, Tom, are you here, Tom?
Oh, sorry. I was saying people only talk to those whom they know. So yeah, that's why.
Oh, you mean that the room was the room was already full of people that was already talking to each
Yeah,
other?
I'm always waiting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's one of the challenges too, is that sometimes if you had an error in logging in, sometimes it shows that you're busy when you're not actually busy. So I think that's one of the challenges. Tom.
Yes, hi David, I'm here. I have other things I need to be doing, but I saw you were having trouble, so I came to see if I could help a little bit.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for popping in. So everybody, this is Professor Tom Malone, and Tom, we're actually just in the last, kind of 7 minutes or so. So this is actually perfect timing for you to drop in, and thanks so much. I know you're supposed to be taking the day off, Tom. I thought we talked about this. This is your day off day.
Yeah, I did it yesterday.
Okay, good. As long as you got some time to rest. Yeah, so Tom, I think one of the challenges, I know that I've seen this in multiple times. So Maria and I, we spent a bunch of time just trying to get into a room. Like if you actually fail at getting in there, then sometimes it appears like you are busy when you're not actually busy. So anyways, I can walk you through some of the buggy parts of it, but it was a little challenging just to get the conversation started for a number of folks.
Okay, I see Carlos just joined too. So if you want, we can stay after and talk a little bit about that.
Okay, yeah, that's great. Why don't we, I'll give you some feedback about that. But just in the last couple of minutes here, for those of you that were able to get into a room, can you just talk a little bit about your experience? I think Chris, you said you were able to get into a room after bouncing around a little. Can you share a little bit about what that was like?
Yeah, the technology had some issues certainly, and had to refresh a few times, but eventually the conversation was really lovely, and we talked about some of the basics about community lab building, but then had a really beautiful discussion about the intersection of art and science, which I think is such it encompasses your work so beautifully, and the whole network, and I think the spirit of the community biolabs vision. So it kind of helped me ground it on another level that I hadn't really considered before.
Great. And which prompt were you guys starting in?
Launching community biolab
projects.
Biolab. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, great. Well, I'm glad to hear that prompt led you into some creative discussion. And I should emphasize here too, the methodology and the framework we've described, it's a framework, but if you end up having great conversations and build a relationship with somebody, but don't necessarily answer the prompt perfectly, that's also a really great outcome. So just to say that as well. So Chris, I think you experienced success in that context. Can some other people share who were able to get into a room, what your experience was like?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Me and Srishta had a really good conversation. There were no technical issues, fortunately. And we also talked about the interdisciplinary approaches in biology, like what should be included. And also we could know a little bit each other. It was a nice experience overall.
Excellent. Okay, good. I'm super glad. And were you able to contribute to the worksheet out of curiosity?
Yeah, really.
Excellent, great. And Aliki is asking, what are the next steps after the creation of ideas? How do you choose which ones to apply? Super great question. So you'll notice that's part of what we built into the form, was the ability to give a +1 or to vote next to an idea that you liked. Now, admittedly, for this year's BioSummit, our ambition was just to generate ideas. And then the second ambition was to get an approximate sense of what people might be interested in. But as I was saying earlier, I think after having done this now for a couple of days, it's pretty clear that we need to have a dedicated time, a longer period of time and a dedicated period of time. So my hope is to actually organize more governance exercises that are outside of the BioSummit. That can almost be like office hours for the community, sort of be like, hey, we're gonna do governance exercise between 3 p.m. and 6 p.m. Eastern on such and such a day, like every week, and just show up if you want to participate. Because that's part of the neat part about the framework. Because it's set up through Google Docs and through Mingler, you can kind of pop in whenever you want. And if there's somebody there, you can go talk to them and work on it. So So I think that's our plan, is to try to set up some regular times where people can actually do that engagement work. And then after we get a lot of ideas, then it'll be incumbent upon a group of people, probably some organizers or any of you that are excited about this. We could all then work together to synthesize and look at the outputs and then actually start thinking about what the next steps would be. So there's, in a way, this first stage is still just generating a bunch of ideas. How to then actually figure out which ones are the best and then how to implement them, that's a whole nother process that we still actually have to think through. And so, for this BioSummit, our ambition was just, we knew we had a unique opportunity with, hundreds of people from around the world. So let's try to create this format, which is, again, a novel combination of a bunch of technologies and conceptual frameworks to see if we could get something to work. And it's gratifying to hear that that at least a number of you were able to get some benefit from it so far. But let's hear another reflection from another group that was able to have a conversation. Can somebody else volunteer to share something? And thank you, Lizzie, for keeping time. We'll do one more reflection and then we can wrap it up. Cecilia, were you able to get into a mingler room?
Yes, I was talking with Christopher.
Oh, okay, it was with Christopher. Oh, good, great.
Yeah, because of the art and science and that.
Oh, that's awesome. You two actually have a lot of common. And by the way, just so you know.
But we have problems. We have problems with the refresh, and sometimes it was frozen, and yeah.
Got it.
But
got it. Okay.
We managed.
Okay, good. Just so you know, Cecilia, I still have the figurines you gave me. Yeah, they're right over there.
Yeah, over there and looking through to the door. Then they can protect you and the home. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, well, everyone, we're basically at time, but I just wanted to close by saying, if the note taker, if whoever is doing notes in the room, I think it's Natalia. Yeah, exactly. There it is. If you can please just add your name to the your information to this spreadsheet, then what we'll do is we'll contact you later. We're going to send this all out to the entire BioSummit as well, but we'd so love to keep in touch with you. If you're interested in this exercise and also even helping interested in helping us shape or launch or organize future exercises, please let us know, because this is a big experiment. There were a lot of unknowns about what we were trying here. So, it's great to hear that we had aspects of it that worked. And what we'll do next is try to figure out where to go from here. So if you're excited about this process, then we would love to hear from you and work with you on future iterations of this exercise. So with that, I think we'll wrap up. So I wanted to thank Kenza and my sister, I think, is here, who's helping with the room, Shrestha and Salman, who've also really helped with the worksheets. And Natalia, again, for helping supporting the room. And then also to Tom and to Carlos. So they're both visiting here as well. This is, they made a little guest appearance. So it's great to see both Tom and Carlos here. They've been helping to build out and figure out the platform. And I should say too, a whole bunch of new features. This whole Mingler groups thing was a very new thing that just got built out very recently. So we tried a bunch of things, a bunch of experiments for the BioSummit. So really appreciate both Tom and Carlos for working with us to try to deploy this exercise. So thank you guys so much. And thanks to everybody. Yeah. Oh yeah. And please continue the discussion in the governance channel as well. You can definitely talk and chat there. I'll be sure to visit that, and we'll continue the conversation. So you guys are amazing. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your sessions. And again, we'll meet back in the nucleus at 7 o'clock. So thanks everybody. Oh, actually, let's take a quick photo with everybody. I forgot. Turn your videos on and let's take a quick photo, especially since we have Tom. This all worked out perfectly. Cool. Oh, wait, hold on. I'm going to grab my... I have to show these because Cecilia gave these to me at BioSummit like I think it was last year or 2 years ago. So, oh my gosh, you have okay, this is perfect. All right, everybody, can we all just smile or wave? And okay, there we go, great. Awesome, thank you guys all so much. This is really, really wonderful. And enjoy the rest of your afternoons or evenings or mornings, wherever you are. And we'll meet back in the nucleus at 7 o'clock to do a wrap up of the whole event. So Take care, everyone.